I'm Cindy Pan. I'm a GP, I'm a mother, and I've done a lot of media. I've written books and quite a lot of newspaper and magazine columns.
How important is your ethnicity to how you see yourself and how you want to be seen?
Well, I don't really think a lot about how I want to be seen. Like, I just assume that I'll be seen as I am. In terms of how I see myself, well, yes, of course, I'm Australian-born Chinese. That's I don't know that I have to think about that any more than I have to think about, what is my name or things like that. But obviously, when you go to school, that's when you really realise that being Chinese is a big deal. It's a big issue for everyone, and therefore for oneself. I just remember, people would just go, "You're Chinese." The way they it's just like a terrible indictment, like saying you're a mass murderer. Like it's not good. It's not a positive identification, and yet you can't say no, I'm not. It's like if someone says you're an idiot, no, I'm not. If someone says you're Chinese, you're like, well, you just don't have any comeback.
So why do you think it is that we see so few Asian Australians in leadership positions?
Well, I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. Even if you want to go back to, say, my experience in infant school. Now, obviously, if you're the one being bullied, you're hardly likely to be voted class captain, are you? And you're not putting yourself up for that sort of role. You don't see yourself in that role. You merely want to be accepted. You want to be allowed to sit on the bench and eat lunch without being told you've got Chinese germs. You're not then thinking, right, now I'm going to be the class captain, school captain.
Do you think that carries through to today, that one of the reasons behind the paucity of Asian Australians in leadership positions is that they don't put themselves forward?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that, because obviously the context has completely changed. The people in the current era compared to then, it's different. I think the other thing is that you can't just take purely the number of Chinese people or Asians in Australia and say, well, that's proportionally. Because I think you've got to take into account, probably to some extent, how newly they've arrived, because I guess there are probably disadvantages if you've learnt English as a second language, or you just are just finding your feet, then maybe there are disadvantages, and there are probably impediments.
Do you think discrimination is alive and well in the workplace today?
I think discrimination is alive and well in all its forms, not obviously not just race, but gender and sexuality and disability, all kinds of things. There's absolutely no doubt. Religious discrimination, there's all kinds of discrimination. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think just depending on the situation, it has different levels of sophistication. And some of it is subconscious, and and it's not just white people who discriminate. Obviously, Chinese people can be racist too, even towards their own. But in terms of getting rid of discrimination, people will always discriminate. that's just the nature of humans. If you look at toddler studies, there's always going to be in-groups and out-groups, and people will always favour when I say always, the majority will always favour the in-group. And people will always, favour, they'll choose the higher status friend. That is human nature. That's what the studies have borne out, and it is a natural, according to evolutionary biology, that is what we should do. Let's get with the strength. That's what people do. I think that we need to educate ourselves and educate young people to try and learn from history. And in some ways we need to fight against evolutionary biology, because evolutionary biology is that we will favour our herd.
Fundamentally, you're an optimist.
You have to be an optimist when you've grown up and experienced and lived what I've lived, and the level of racism, just arch, bold, blatant, unsophisticated, pure, nasty racism, to then a lot of sort of a more covert, much more sophisticated racism, to then more subtle forms of racism. So much so that you're then a bit surprised when you do come across the blatant racism, which is obviously still there. I think, you know, some people are deeply bigoted and really quite nasty. I mean, we know that. And those people probably won't change. Of course it's gotten better, and I think that there will always be more people who are not racist than people that are racist. But this idea that you will have a situation where people don't discriminate anymore, that's farcical. Like, of course people will always discriminate. That's just like saying, oh, one day we won't have sexism. Like, that's just ridiculous.